I am Connor Harris, the operations manager here at the Greensboro Science Center. On top of that, I am now the beekeeper.
Hello, I'm John Rossi. I'm a touring drummer with a passion for animal conservation. When I'm on the road, I spend as much time as possible visiting zoos, aquariums, and conservation organizations. Now, I want to share those places with you. I'll be talking to keepers, vets, conservationists, anyone who can help me in my mission of connecting my people to animals through their people. Join me on my Rossifari. Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome back to another episode of the Rossifari podcast. Y'all, I am abuzz about this episode because we are going to be bringing you yet another kind of different facet of life at a zoo. I'm always excited when I get to bring you new positions, things and people that are at zoos that we haven't talked about yet. And honestly, with this, coming up on the start of our 5th year soon, there aren't a whole lot of those anymore. But this is one of those because it turns out that our good friends at the Greensboro Science Center have a beekeeper. And I know that's not very surprising because you heard it in the intro, but hey, whatever, I'm excited. So, Connor Harris is the beekeeper at the Greensboro Science Center, and we have this whole long conversation all about bees and being a beekeeper at a zoo. And the fact that the public can see the beekeeper go and keep the bees and stuff, and what goes into hosting a hive at a facility. And there's a whole lot that goes on here. You are going to learn so much about bees and bee conservation. And it's a really good, really unique time. And of course, it's, happening at Greensboro because we have such great connections there and such great times there. I genuinely feel like if you went and listened to all of the Greensboro Science Center episodes so far, and the ones that I'm sure will be coming down the pike, you would basically get a perfect look at almost every aspect of what goes into making a zoo be a zoo, from relief keepers to head keepers to PR people interrupting my interviews to beekeepers to some of the higher ups that we've had on. It's a really cool, really unique look, and I think that's become one of my favorite things lately. Not only do I love the Greensboro Science Center because of the facility, the animals, and the people, but I love that the relationship we have there has allowed me to bring so many different facets of one facility to y'all. And this is one that I didn't even realize they had. As a matter of fact, when Becca suggested my interview here and was like, hey, you should talk to Connor, he's our beekeeper, I was like, excuse me? Didn't even know they had, hives. I completely missed them. I was shocked to find out where they were. This is not too surprising, as I also, back in the day, missed the fact that they have, binturongs, one of my favorite animals. But so I'm super stoked to have this one with y'all. And a couple of quick reminders before we get to it. First of all, make sure that you hit subscribe so you don't miss any interview or Zoo News episodes. Make sure you're following along at Rossifari on the socials and at Rossifari Pod on the TikTok machine. And, if you want to leave a review or give me some 5 stars in some places, that's always really helpful. And, of course, if you want to support the pod, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Rossifari. So with all of that said, I was, getting to the top of this interview, and I settled down with Connor. And we got everything figured out. And then Connor decided that he had to go pee, and Becca grabbed the microphone. So enjoy that.
All right, John. Well, Connor left, so I guess you have to interview me.
Yeah, I hit record, and then he was like, I have to pee, and just walked out. So this interview is going great so far.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, my name's Becca.
Oh, God.
I'm the marketing manager at the Greensboro Science
Everyone
Center.
knows who you are. Everyone is already dreading this.
And today we're going to be talking about me.
We're not.
The light of your life.
We're not.
The light of the podcast.
I actually like this as an introduction for this episode because we're going to be talking about bees, and you're just buzzing around my microphone right now.
When do I mean, you didn't want to get the bathroom and
I didn't. That's fair. That is fair.
You didn't want to record them. That's why I got, whenever you went to Brewed and Bottled, that's why I got you to get the killer bee.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that looks like a good drink.
It is. Cayenne, cinnamon, honey, coffee. What more could you ask for?
Yeah, I mean that's all good stuff. I guess we're plugging this coffee place now.
Shout out to Brewed and Bottled.
Yeah, so let's tell everybody about how I got you off gross coffee.
Yeah, so John was like, Becca, Starbucks, that's not good coffee.
Literally, I would be like, Becca, do you want a drink from somewhere? And she'd be like, only if you're going to Starbucks. And I'd be going to all these cool, like, fancy places.
Yeah. And now I see how wrong I was.
So wrong.
How wrong I was.
Yeah.
So now we have a great partnership with Brewed and Bottled. Not John, but the Greensboro Science Center. I mean, maybe John.
I mean, they followed me this morning.
Oh, okay.
I found that ironic since I was going there. Like, they followed me before I went there today.
Oh, that's because you're cool.
Well, yeah, obviously. Yeah. Cool. All right. Yeah.
Yeah, John went to Brewed and Bottled. And I got a killer bee again just for you, Connor.
Yep.
Not for me. You're
No. She told me not to get drinks for anyone else. She said it's just got to be hers. So. All right. So let's start off with you telling me who you are, where we are, and why the hell someone's walking into my room for an interview. No, I'm kidding. Take two. All right.
That it doesn't say recording in progress.
Yeah. All right. So who are you? Where are we? What do you do here?
Yeah, I am Connor Harris. I am the operations manager here at the Greensboro Science Center in Greensboro, North Carolina. What that means is I'm in charge of pretty much all the foot traffic coming through the door day in, day out of the Greensboro Science Center. On top of that, I am now the official beekeeper here. Throughout the weeks, I go in and out of the hives to make sure they're doing good. I'm looking for very specific things like, do we still have our queen? Is she laying eggs? Do we have enough resources? Are the worker bees bringing in nectar and pollen? Are they guarding the hive? We just want to make sure that there's no bacterial infections, viral infections, if we can see any obvious signs of mites or beetles as well. So those are the things I'm looking at week in and week out.
Okay, cool. And we are going to talk a lot more about both of those things. But yeah, I think, the bee thing really pops off for me. It's really interesting and I'm really curious about it. So let's dive right into that. I didn't even realize that there were bees here. So I'm pretty sure it's not like a major exhibit or anything. So tell me about just the logistics. Where are the bees? Why are the bees here? All of that stuff.
So the Greensboro Science Center used to have honeybee hives in our zoo probably about 4 years ago. And we had them for quite a while with different people in charge of them, volunteers as well as staff members. But we were noticing that they weren't getting a full attention that they needed. And it takes a lot of time to take care of the honeybees. It takes dedication week in and week out, and we're very busy here, so it's sometimes hard to dedicate that much time. So just this year, we started back our honeybee hives here. We have 2 hives that are now over by our pygmy hippo exhibit. So they're actually below our boardwalk out in our Revolution Ridge. You can walk our boardwalk and look down at our 2 brand new hives. They're kind of off to the side, so you have to be looking for them a little bit. We have some signage out there, but it's a beautiful spot. We can have guests and educational interpreters standing up on the boardwalk, and they're able to watch as I am in the hives working with the honeybees. And it really makes for a great educational moment for guests because they can watch everything I'm doing. They can see all of the bees coming in and out of the hives, even if I'm not there, as well as when I am there, they can watch me suit up. They can watch me light my smoker. They can see me go into the hives. They can ask the interpreter if they're there any questions, or they can directly ask me questions. And we're close enough that we can have a full conversation without any risk or very low risk of people getting stung or the bees, interacting with them. We're right next to Country Park, so people can look out and see Country Park. There's a huge lake out there that, the bees definitely take advantage of for water and everything. And I mean, the entire country park has, trees, flowers, everything, but we also have the Guilford County Battleground Park, the battlefield, which is, in that part of our national park system. So, there's a lot of area for our bees to forage and see things. So why we have honeybees here is a great question. Honeybees are extremely important part of our agricultural system across the nation, across the world. More than a third of the fruits and vegetables that you hold in your hand that you see at the store are pollinated by honeybees, and probably more than 2/3 are pollinated by, all of our plants are pollinated by insects. But honeybees specifically are a perfect organism, a perfect insect for us to use as a educational, conservational piece to the huge puzzle or pie that is insect conservation, whether it's native or non-native. And technically, honeybees are non-native insects. They were brought over here almost 400 years ago. But in that time, we've coexisted and co-evolved with honeybees for 400 years. And essentially at this point in North America, they're no longer an invasive species. They are part of what we do day in and day out. And they're a great component to our conservation piece because a lot of people can easily identify a honeybee.
Mm-hmm.
Why it might be a little bit harder to identify the difference between a carpenter bee and a bumblebee. So it's very easy to talk to people about honeybees. Everybody's attached to them. Everybody hears those keywords of, pesticides, colony collapse disorder, and it gives us a great jumping off platform to talk about all of those components. And on top of that, a lot of the same conservational options or things that we can do at our home to help honeybees, help native pollinators, help other native bees, they help butterflies, they help wasps. Anything we can do for honeybees are very similar to what we can do. So it's easy to talk about honeybees and talk about their importance, talk about how we can save them, because in that same breath, we're also saving a lot of our native species.
That's very cool. I like that a lot. And yeah, I haven't really had a lot of people on talking about insects yet. So, I guess I have just lots of thoughts, as I always do. But the first thing that pops out to me is that especially kids, there are people that are afraid of bees and afraid of honeybees. And it sounds like what you're doing is like, I expected this, I guess, to be more contained, but you're saying it's out there. It's in the open. You are having bees here that then go out into the park and can, go up on Revolution Ridge and all that stuff. Have you had any pushback, or does anyone get nervous about that or freak out at all?
Yeah, when I'm down there, you can definitely hear people that are nervous, and it's easy to quickly talk about that with them. And if they have questions, kind of helping them be at ease, right? But the great part is, we are 10 to 12 feet away from the hives. I'm in the hives, but we have guests that are 10 feet away, but they're also about 5 feet up. So that means that they're looking out towards Country Park and down, and they can see me working. And what I try to say is, yes, they're seeing honeybees coming in and out, but the main thing to know is that a honeybee will travel, as soon as it leaves the hive, it usually travels straight out and at the same level that it's coming out of the hive until it reaches an obstacle, a fence or something, and then it will change course. So our hives do not point towards the boardwalk. They point at an angle that allows the bees to come in and out so our guests can see them, but those bees should never really be going towards the boardwalk. And that's a really quick conversation and easy, and most people see that. Most people walk up and see that all the honeybees are going out towards the park because it's very easy to see them coming in and out. And they don't really get up there in the boardwalk because it's about, like I said, about 5 feet taller. So the bees will not go up there with them usually. So as you mentioned, there are a lot of people that are nervous around bees, who like to swat, who like to step away because they get very nervous about it. And that's completely understandable. And that's part of our job, right? Is to remind them, they don't mean you any harm. If you just take a breath, step away if you need to, or, swatting at them, definitely that that does anger them, right? So, but here at the Greensboro Science Center, the way we have it set up is rarely any of those honeybees get up to where our guests are. And if people are nervous, we have a quick conversation and, explain to them about how to stay safe and how our honeybees are in a very good location that allow them to engage and watch without being affected or possibly stung.
That's very cool. I like that. And another thing that I'm curious about though is, so, that's great for the guests, but you're going in the hives, and I'm looking at you and you don't seem to be all swollen and blotchy and stuff right now. So I'm guessing that you take some precautions when you're down there. So can you talk a little bit about what you do to keep yourself safe down there?
Yeah, that's a great question, because nobody should ever go up to a honeybee hive, whether it's a feral colony or a domesticated colony, without some sort of protection, or if they're extremely advanced in their training and feel comfortable. So every time before I go out to the hives, we have a special way to get to our hives that you'll see if you're here. And what I do is I go up behind them, so I'm not facing right directly in their flight path coming in and out of the hives. And I take a look to see how they're doing based on, how active they are coming in and out of the hives. So the biggest thing is when I'm going out there is weather. So I want to make sure I'm not going out at night. I want to make sure that if I'm going out during the day, it's above, say, 60 degrees or so. We have a good sunny day, low winds, and no rain. Cloud coverage, rain, cold, darkness, those are things that can set off bees to be a little bit more angry, a little bit more upset. They like the warmth, they like the sun, they like to be out and about during those times. So if I'm going in there when it's cold, rainy, overcast, those are just extra things that can cause our honeybees to be upset. So we definitely want to make sure that that's our first precaution. Make sure it's a good day to actually go in. And so those are the things we're looking for. Next thing is, say we're out there, sunny day, it's 80 degrees. I'm happy. They're happy. They look happy. I'm going to suit up. So I'm always going to wear my veil, which is essentially my beekeeper suit. So I'm going to have a hood on over my head so that I can still see out and see my bees and see the people around me, but the bees cannot get in. I'm going to have my bee suit on, which includes the veil, has long arms, long sleeves that go down to my hands. And I'm always going to have long pants on. Now, your beekeeper suit might be a full suit that goes from head to toe. Mine is just the jacket. And then I wear long pants that are not brightly colored or have patterns on them. I wear very bland brown pants with very bland brown working boots. And I make sure that the ends of my boots, I have tight socks that are covering the ends of my pants, or I have, the pants themselves have cuffs. The last thing I do once I make sure I'm fully suited up, I have my outfit on, I have my pants on, my boots on, I start my smoker. And what that is, most beekeepers will use a smoker. And what that is just people have probably seen it, but essentially it's a little can that has a funnel kind of towards the top and an ability to put different, whether it's wood chips, pine needles, cotton. Some people use like little wood pellets. Anything you can really find. You put that in there, you light it with your lighter, and you wait a little bit. And you want to make sure that you're getting a thick, strong, cool smoke going. And what that does is it will last your entire time you're in the hive, and you can use it while you're working. So what the smoke does is it actually kind of calms down the bees in the easiest explanation. So what it does is it kind of interferes with their ability to sense their surroundings. They get a little bit nervous. They go deep into their hive, away from the entrances, away from the tops of the frames, and try to find the queen to make sure that she's okay. But what it does is allow me to work in a hive without much resistance and frustration. Now, if your smoke is too hot, or you're using too much, or you're pushing too forcefully, that can actually frustrate the bees. Too much or too hot will actually make them a little bit more mad. So the last thing I do is put my gloves on. Everybody has different opinions. Some people use the thick beekeeper gloves. Some people use latex or nitrile gloves, and some people go without any gloves at all. I've done all three. So everything has its advantage. Without any gloves, you're more susceptible to getting stung, but it usually means you're more cautious because you can feel every little, wing beat. You can feel every little step on your finger. So when a bee gets onto your hand, you're much more in tune with the bees around you. And usually it means you're going to be a little bit more careful and a little bit more aware of what's going on. But if you're not comfortable with that or not experienced, you can easily get stung or feel, like you're not protected enough. The next step, of course, level is latex or nitrile gloves, which gives you a little bit in between. There is some protection, like a bee sometimes sting can always get through a glove, but you still have a little bit more feeling, a little bit more dexterity with your hands, and it'll keep you fairly safe, right in the middle. And that's what I lately have been using the most because I feel the most comfortable in those. The last one is the thick beekeeper gloves, which are great when you're going into very aggressive colonies or when you do have to go out when it's rainy or overcast because they're going to be a little bit more upset. They provide much less dexterity, a little bit thicker if they don't fit you well, so it's harder to work with the hive sometimes, but it provides, like 99% protection. Whatever that number may be, but definitely way more protection. Even if a bee stings you, it rarely gets through the actual thick gloves. I don't use those as much anymore now that I feel more confident in my abilities because I feel that I actually am getting stung more if I'm using those because I upset the bees because I don't feel them, I don't see them, and I'm just kind of goofing around with my gloves. So yeah, that's what I do to get ready before going into a hive. Checking the weather, getting my bee suit on, putting my gloves on, getting the smoker ready, and then I'm ready to go into the hive.
Nice, very cool. And obviously, the next follow up is, what do you do when, what are you actually doing as a keeper in there? All right, we'll be back after this quick break.
Hi, this is Kathy Hill from the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program. We're all about restoration projects in progress this season on One Lagoon, One Voice. Learn about the great strides the lagoon community is taking to restore and protect the Indian River Lagoon. Each week, we dive deep into discussions with scientists, resource managers, and nonprofit leaders to explore lagoon issues and solutions. From oyster reefs to clam restoration, algae blooms to muck, you'll learn all about the projects we're tackling to bring the Indian River Lagoon back to health. Click the link in the show notes to follow One Lagoon, One Voice, learn about the IRL Council, and explore our unique lagoon.
Yeah, so when I'm going into a honeybee hive, the first thing I want to know is, why am I going into it? I need to think ahead of time. I'm not just going in just for fun, just to look at it. What am I looking for today? So normally things that I'm going to be looking for are, where's my queen? Is she laying her eggs? Is she doing a good job with that? Are there any signs of disease? Whether it's bacterial, viral, varroa mites, beetles, anything like that. As well as, are the workers doing what they need? Do we have enough population? Do we have good stages of, egg to larval to pupal to adult bees? And things like that. Those are the main things I'm looking for when I'm going in for a weekly hive inspection during the spring and the summer.
How self-sustaining is this population? Because you mentioned they're going and getting their own water. They're going and getting their own food. If it's like a rainy day, you don't even go and check on them. And I'm thinking, a lot of my listeners are coming at it from a zoo perspective. And I mean, yes, this is part of the zoo. But, you can't just not go and check on a serval because it's raining. So, you can't not feed an animal for a day or whatever. So, what kind of, how self-sustaining? Like I asked.
That's a great question.
Please leave that in there.
Oh, that's staying in. The fact that you wanted to set it up like that was amazing.
Don't say
the best part is, I have people I regularly have guests be like, "Whoa, that's a great question," but I've never heard "That's a great question" before.
I was trying not to laugh while I was saying it.
Be more sparkly. You're so more
Amazing question.
Nailed it. Okay, so unlike this podcast interview, how self-sustaining is your bee population?
So honeybees have been around for millions of years without our help. So to think about that, a lot of people, their only image or idea of a honeybee hive is domesticated in the white box. But honeybees have survived for millions of years without our interruption or domestication. So if you see a honeybee hive out in the wild, that bee population, that beehive will be fine. They can figure everything out on their own. They have evolved to absolutely survive any condition and figure out what they have to do. Whether that means they have to kill off their queen or they need to split their own hive and take the queen with them and the old hive has to make a new queen. They know what they're doing and how to do it. However, now that we've domesticated honeybees, we want them to stay with us. We want to continue getting honey from them. We want to continue using them as an educational component at the Science Center and everywhere else. So to do that, we need to go in weekly or every other week to make sure that they aren't planning to leave. Because in the wild, they might take a week or two to decide they want to split their hive and they're going to swarm and they're going to leave, abscond the hive. And now that we have two hives that are much smaller. But at the Science Center, if that happened, we would lose our honeybees. It's very possible. So going in weekly or every other week, make sure that we are keeping our honeybees in check and they don't 100% follow their natural instinct. And their natural instinct is to grow in the spring till they're at this absolutely huge population size and then split their hive in two. And one will stay and one will go. A domesticated hive might not survive that. So we want to make sure that doesn't happen. In the wild, that happens all the time. So they are very self-sustaining in the fact that they go get their own water, their own nectar, their own pollen, their own food, and keep their hive alive and their queen alive. But we make sure that they don't get too happy and want to leave us.
Right.
So that's kind of the difference between domestication and feral colonies is that our intervention keeps them around for longer than they might be in the wild.
That's cool. And then you mentioned they might kill a queen.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a big Game of Thrones fan, so I'm intrigued by all of this stuff. So what is and I'm sure I'm anthropomorphizing here, but what is the social structure? What is the regicide is a thing, and how does all of that work for honeybees?
That's a really great question, actually.
See, at least you sounded sincere that time. Becca is on the floor laughing. Oh, this is one of my favorites.
Oh my God.
So honeybees are what we call a eusocial insect. They have an extremely advanced social hierarchy, social structure. And essentially, they're all for one. All they care about is surviving the spring, surviving the summer, surviving the winter, and starting all over again next year. So a honeybee hive is set up with our queen at the top. But contrary to popular belief, she's not actually 100% in charge of the hive. And we can get back to that, but the way that it works is our queen, for the most part, is in charge of what's going on. Below her are the worker bees, all of which will always be female. So when you think about a honeybee hive, during the winter, 100% of the bees that are in that hive are female. During the spring and summer, you might get closer to 80 to 90% are female, while we do have some of the male honeybees, which are called drones. So that's how it is. We have our queen bee, singular insect, and then we have anywhere from 30 to 60,000 worker female bees. And below that, we have our male drones, which are just there to reproduce with other queen bees from other hives. So that's the social structure. Now, within the worker bee population, we have a wide range of jobs. Everybody is tasked with a job. Now, a worker bee might only live 3 to 5 weeks. And during that time, they are promoted quite quickly to different jobs. So when they're first born, they're going to have one job that's much different than when they are about to die. So as I mentioned, there's the 3 castes of bees with the queen bee, the worker bee, and the male drone bee. So worker bees are actually split up. So as soon as they're born, they are given a task. They start working immediately, and they're actually called new bees, N-E-W, which means newly emerged worker, and they are very identifiable versus an older bee. As soon as this new worker emerges from its cell, it'll take a little bit of time, but it starts working. The first 2 to 3 days, they're usually just cleaning cells. So these are the little hexagon shapes that you see that on the honeybee frames. From there, they'll go to a nurse bee, which is where they take care of the dead bees, a little bit of cleaning and nurturing the younger bees as well. Then they'll become queen attendants, where they will follow the queen around and take care of her, cleaning her, making sure she has what she needs, protecting her. And then they will, for a few days, start building wax. So they'll create a lot of the wax, all the comb you see on the frames. That's what they'll start doing. And last but not least, what most people consider the most important is foraging bees. So the bees that you see going in and out of the hives are the older bees. Usually at week 3 until they die, they will be foraging, whether that's going to get water, whether that's going to get nectar from flowers, pollen, anything like that. They will be able to actually go out, get that, and come back. So that's the breakdown of the system inside of the hive. Now, I mentioned the queen's not always in charge. So if she starts doing bad, whether that means she's not laying her eggs properly or she's not efficient enough, maybe she's putting 2 to 3 eggs in a frame, in a cell instead of 1, or maybe she's just too slow. Different things that can happen. The worker bees can revolt in a sense and force her to lay her replacement egg, and they'll feed this egg what we call royal jelly, and they'll raise her into a queen bee. And that queen could actually fight the other queen, and the stronger queen will persist. Additionally, if the colony gets too overpopulated or maybe it's not doing well, they can actually split the hive in what we call swarming, and they will have workers, foraging bees, that will go out and find a new nest, a new cavity in a tree, a new, maybe a hole in a wall at your house they'll go into, and they're really happy about that. And they will go out there, they will find it, they'll come back, they'll communicate to the hive what they've found, and they will take half the hive and they'll go to that new nest. And we call that swarming. And you'll probably have seen a lot of TikTok videos or Facebook or whatever of people sticking their hands with bare hands into a ball of bees and pulling the queen out or just messing with them. And these are usually swarming bees. They're engorged on, they're overfed, or they're engorged on their honey or pollen or whatever. And that's to be able to make that flight to their new house, to their new home. And they need all of that extra energy to do that. And because they're engorged, all they're focused on is getting from point A to point B with the queen, and they're not as interested in stinging or protecting like that. So that's why you can see people going in with bare hands and an entire ball of bees.
Wow, that's really interesting. It's also amazing how they just all get those different jobs and figure it out and just in a couple of weeks. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's all based on chemicals like hormones and pheromones and the level at which they're receiving those signals to be able to make those changes from, the cell cleaner to the foraging bee, but also how well the queen's doing, where they can find her. And another, chemical or scent that they recognize is if I'm in there and I accidentally smush a honeybee, they're all gonna come after me. They smell that, and now it's on my fingers, and usually at that point I got to step away because they actually can recognize that their friend, their, sister has died.
Wow. Okay. That's really interesting. It's such a different, set of responsibilities and way of doing things than normal, like zookeeper-y type stuff that I, normally interview about. And I find the whole thing very interesting. I do have to ask, do you name the bees? Because I think Queen Beatrice would be amazing.
You would also be amazed at how many people have come up with that one before.
I'm not. I knew when I started this that I was being annoying on purpose.
So Beyonce, that's a really
nice.
popular one.
Nice.
Just Queen Bee, people, there's all sorts of names. Yeah. So because we just brought our honeybees back to the Science Center, I do want to name them, and so does everyone else. But because it's been a long time since they've been back, I wanted to make sure that we had strong established colonies before we named anyone. We usually only name the queen bees because it's hard to come up with 60,000 names for the workers. But we actually mark the queen with a dot depending on the year, and she's easy to find. So, and we're hoping she lasts, 3 to 5 years. Sometimes it's way less, sometimes it's way more, depending on, where you are and how often you're checking and everything. So we're hoping she's going to be around a long time, and it is fun to name them. But I want to make sure before we name our queens that we have very strong colonies and we can expect them to live longer, because it's kind of sad when they die and you have a name for them. So we're waiting right now. Just stay tuned, though.
What you just said is such a great thing, though, because I talk a lot about, how building empathy is important for conservation stories. And the fact that even you as a beekeeper who just said, sometimes, you're in there and you smush a bee. When you're dealing with 30,000 animals in a small space, that's going to happen. But even then you're when you name a queen bee and it dies, that's sad, which I think is really cool, because I do think giving names and that kind of stuff is a great way to build empathy. So that's actually a great conservation message. And I would just like to propose that maybe one of the names could be Pam Beasley.
That's a good one right there. Yeah. I will say that.
Just saying.
What I think we're going to do is come up with a few names within the staff and then propose them to our guests so they can help pick the name. Because it's fun when you're out here and a guest can be like, oh, there is Pam Beasley. There's Beyonce. They can associate a little bit more. And like you said, it helps to build that empathy within our guests and our staff, to have a little bit more of a connection with them.
Yeah, which I think is extra important since, again, people are sometimes afraid of bees, which, yeah. So I know that there's been a whole lot of discussion online and misinformation, I think, out there about the plight of different bees and what's going on and what's not going on and what bees are struggling and what bees aren't. And I've just seen a lot of stuff, some of which was very, it's their memes. Well-intentioned, maybe, but yeah. So can you talk a little bit about that?
All right, we'll be back after this quick break.
What if I told you scientists discovered 100 new species in the deep ocean?
Why did crocodiles survive extinction?
Megalodon. How did it go extinct?
Hey, it's me, Forrest Galante, wildlife biologist. You might know me from Joe Rogan's podcast or my various TV shows like Extinct or Alive and Shark Week. Join me and my friends as we dive into the wild world of animal anomalies and everything wildlife. Don't miss out. Click here to uncover these mind-blowing animal mysteries.
What specifically are you talking about? Just how honeybees are affected, or how all of our bees are affected? What are you?
Well, if I remember correctly, I do these news episodes, and I cover 20, 30 stories a week, and sometimes I go in one ear and out the other.
Mm-hmm. Colony collapse disorder.
Well,
things
yeah, that kind of thing. But also, I vaguely remember a thing where there was a meme a while ago where honeybee populations are rebounding and everything's great, but then it was not the honeybees that had been struggling to begin with or something. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know
just that misinformation kind of.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
So honeybees came over about 400 years ago, and since then we've domesticated them, and populations that we were in charge of have grown and grown over time. And I would say in the 50s it was up to 6 to 8 million domesticated hives in the United States, and it's gone down ever since then. And that's for a number of reasons, whether it's people don't have the time anymore, and then more recently it's been because of what we call colony collapse disorder, which is a kind of a word to use to talk about a lot of issues that are plaguing our honeybees, and not just our honeybees, but all insects and animals around the world, with climate change, loss of habitats, changing diets due to, whether it's how we take care of crops nowadays, or because of deforestation, we lose a lot of valuable flowering plants. There's a lot of things that are happening, antibiotic resistance in our bacteria, new emerging viral infections, these things that we call varroa mites and hive beetles carry a lot of infections, and all of those things are leading to our honeybees declining. However, there has been a huge thrust in information and conservation for our honeybees. Back in the early 2000s, I think that's kind of when that started. And everybody was like, save the bees, save the bees. And they have made a huge rebound since the early 2000s to where we're back to close to 3.5 million, 4 million hives. And that's probably not even accurate, with a lot of people probably not reporting what they're doing. So honeybees do well out in the wild, especially feral colonies, because they do what they need to do to survive. While domesticated hives, we are more focused on getting honey. More people are focused on, getting honey, using them for pollination services, taking them from the East Coast to the West Coast to pollinate almonds, which, is great for our almond business. But taking our honeybees for a few months out of the year, early in the year, usually like February, all the way across the country to start that, that's traveling diseases. That's a lot of hives that we're moving over and stressing out. And that can cause a lot of issues. Like we might be bringing stuff from the East Coast to the West Coast that they haven't been introduced to yet, whether that's infections, viral or bacterial mites. So that's been a lot of cause nowadays, is what's causing a lot of our issues. Is before it was, a lot of stuff that we didn't know about what was going on. And now a lot of information has come out that, that travel causes issues. A lot of our neonicotinoid pesticides, climate change, loss of habitat, all kind of contribute to our honeybee loss. But like I mentioned, they are making a good rebound because of that huge initiative by people, local hobbyist beekeepers, as we call them, that are more interested in, making a strong hive and getting a little bit of honey out of it, instead of sole purpose is to make money off of our hives. So that was a huge push for a lot of people. Now, what I will say is one of the biggest things that is always kind of pushed back, because everybody does identify more with a honeybee, are our native bees, like bumblebees, carpenter bees, even our other native pollinators, just like, butterflies and stuff. They also struggle with the same things that honeybees struggle with, which is climate change, loss of habitat, loss of, flowering plants. And with the changing weather, a lot of our plants are flowering earlier in the year and stop flowering and providing that nectar early in the year as well. So there is a loss of time frame sometimes. It gets warmer early in the year, it gets hotter quicker. So there's sometimes that time frame is shrunk down, that honeybees and other native bees and native pollinators have less time to go out and actually collect nectar and create strong reserves for the winter. So there is definitely a more emphasis that we need to put on our native pollinators. And I think there definitely is, and that's something that we have noticed that needs more attention. And that's hopefully something that we continue to do here at the Science Center, is not just talk about honeybees, but also push the importance of our native pollinators. Things like bee hotels for our isolated bees, like carpenter bees, things like double checking what type of pesticides and herbicides you're using at home. We can do a little bit more natural things that do the same exact, killing. It might take a day longer, but they do the same things, but they don't affect our native and our non-native bees and pollinator species, as well as when you're putting those applications out, like doing it at night at like 6 or 7 p.m. when the honeybees are inside for the night, and letting it dry up overnight, like waiting a few days after rain when you are putting those applications out, are great ways specifically for pesticides and herbicides to avoid affecting bees as much. Allowing clover in your yard. I know everybody wants that nice, beautiful lawn that's cut low and thick and luscious, but maybe if you have clover in your yard, maybe cutting a circle out. That's what I like to do. Is I have an area in my yard that I don't cut. It has that white clover that's out. Bees love that. And if you could maybe cut your yard and leave that small space, and that becomes a pollinator garden, and you don't even have to do anything. You actually did less. You don't have to cut as much grass. And on top of that, planting different flowering plants that are going to come back every year that will allow native pollinators and non-native pollinators to use them. So one of the things you can do is look at your local extension, your pollinator or bee extension. Like North Carolina State University has a wonderful state extension that we can use for a lot of, not just plants and bees, but native pollinators, everything that has a lot of information about when plants are flowering, when do they stop flowering, the best thing to plant in this area, what we can do more so for our bees. And a lot of states have public, state institutions that offer those resources. And a lot of places also have local and state beekeeper associations that they can get a lot more information. What are the best plants, in New York to plant versus North Carolina? We're in much different climate zones. So there are going to be plants that are better for your bees up there compared to mine.
Yeah, no, makes sense. And I'm curious. So what was your title? The COO is your title here?
Yes, we'll go with COO for the day.
Okay.
But every other day, it's operations manager.
That's what, I know, something like that. Okay, operations manager. Cool. So how the heck does the operations manager become the beekeeper?
So when I started in 2020, I saw honeybee hives outside. And I had experience working with beehives, and I really wanted to get in and help where I could. And I just didn't have the time back then. I couldn't find the time. And somehow I have become the beekeeper. And how I did that was I realized that we no longer were maintaining our hives. And I found the right people in the terrestrial team as well as our conservation team and worked with them to get honeybee hives back here after I kind of put a small presentation together about, my history and why it's important to the Greensboro Science Center and what we should do, kind of a program together with Lindsay Zarecki, VP of Conservation here. And we really worked together to bring them back here. And my background is in 2018, I had a scholarship to a university, and to keep a scholarship, you need to hit a certain credit threshold. And I just had a few classes I needed to get done to graduate. And I was like, what can I find to fill my time this semester? My last semester, spring of 2018, and I found a honeybee biology and beekeeping course that a new professor, well, he wasn't new, but the professor had a new course the first year. It was a very selective, I believe there were only 10 or 12 of us in there, and he hand selected after applications for the course who could be in there. And we worked together, and he taught me everything I needed to learn about the biology behind a honeybee and the honeybee hive, but also the practical and technical experience. So we brought hives to the University of Central Florida, and we took care of them, and we learned not just how to keep a bee, but why are we doing that? Why do we go into a hive every week? Why are we looking for this and not that? Why is this important over that? And we really got to do a lot with that class. Dr. B is what I called him. What is his
Oh my God.
When it's time to get buzzy, call on Dr. B.
So this class at the University of Central Florida was with Dr. Patrick Bolin, or as I called him, Dr. B.
Dr. B!
Yep. He was amazing, and he's still doing that class to my knowledge to this day. We're friends on Facebook, and I see him posting every so often. And, it's absolutely awesome to see that I was the first set of students that had the official class. And I did not realize that a small 3-credit course for 4 months in the spring of 2018 would lead to so much. Because actually after that, what I did was I started working at the University of North Carolina in Greensboro, doing honeybee work in a research lab. And that just continued to really cement my love for honeybees, biology, beekeeping, research, conservation. So I have quite a lot of experience in the research side of honeybees as well as the technical beekeeping side. And here I actually work with another beekeeper in Greensboro, Phoebe Snyder, who is an amazing beekeeper, absolutely amazing. And she continues to help me. Usually we meet once a month, maybe twice a month. She was just here today helping us requeen a hive. And she continues to help me grow as a beekeeper, which I really appreciate.
That's really cool. And, you keep mentioning conservation. So is there a conservation organization you'd like to give a shout out to?
Not one in particular, but what I recommend for everybody is to look up their local and state beekeeping associations, because you can volunteer, you can donate to your organization. Specifically for us, North Carolina State Beekeeper Association is a wonderful organization with, I think, over 4,000 members.
Wow.
And they do a lot. And right now they're actually pushing to help an endowment come to North Carolina State University to have a full-time, I think, North Carolina apiarist professor, that their job is to be, the top apiarist, researcher in North Carolina, but hopefully across the United States. So that's what I really recommend, because every beekeeper that's a part of that is really focused on the conservation of honeybees, because it's either they're a hobbyist or it's they're a commercial beekeeper that needs, the support and to keep them alive. And whatever we can do with the research of honeybees and with just hobbyists, keeping good care of their bees, those are the organizations I would look up.
Very cool. And one other question before we get to our final thing, but which is, of course, how many times have you been stung?
So when I got into beekeeping in 2018, I don't think I had ever been stung before. And I probably got stung that year only 2 or 3 times. So in total, I would say I probably have only been stung maybe 12 to 15 times.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of working with very good and calm bees and also being calm myself. Most of the time I get stung on my fingers and my hands. That's my main spot I've been stung on.
It's time now, don't you know? We've come to the end of the show. But there's one tale left to go. You're gonna laugh and say, oh no. It's time for the Rossifari poop story.
So one time when I was reclaiming some old hives, I wanted to get the hive boxes and the frames back from them and do a little bit of cleaning from them. I've been told that, the honeybees had left and I should go in there and just get everything I needed out. So I actually went into the hives. No bees, of course. They really had been gone for a while. And I thought that they were there maybe 9 months ago. So I go in, and the first thing I see is a rat's nest in the hive. And I jumped back. I was so surprised. I was like, there's a rat living in here. So I slowly start taking it apart. And guess what I find? 2 rat skeletons in the hive. So not only had the honeybees had been gone so long that rats were able to come inside of the hive and live in the hive. They lived so long that they died and rotted to a skeleton. So really, these honeybees had not been there for multiple years. So I was taken aback, but I was very surprised to find rat skeletons in some hives that I was reclaiming for somebody. And that was one of the most surprising things that I had opened up to.
Nice. All right. Very cool. Well, thank you for taking the time to do this.
You're welcome. I really appreciate you having me. Keep doing what you're doing. It's awesome.
Thanks, man. Whew, thank God Connor came in and, stopped that from being a Becca interview. But seriously, how cool is that? They have bees there and a beekeeper and wow, I learned so much. I feel like I learned so much in this episode and it was really fun. So yeah, I hope y'all enjoyed that one as much as I did. And I have to tell you, just so you know, I know sometimes we do these things where Becca steals the intro or Danny jumps in a podcast or whatever we do. And literally we treat it like none of it is planned, but I want you to know that as a professional, honestly, none of it is planned. It is the most ridiculous thing. I always just go with the flow and have fun with it, and then question myself while I'm editing it, but ultimately leave it in because I know y'all crack up and love it. But I love when things like that happen and when there are facilities and guests that are so comfortable that they can do that with me. So yay, Becca, but more importantly, yay, Connor, because that was really cool. Lots of fun, interesting information. And I'm just grateful for all of this. So I hope y'all enjoyed that. And I'd like to take a moment to say thank you to my Red Panda level patrons, Dr. Laura Schenk, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, and Jenny Owens. Jenny Owens isn't really a good one to hold out the first syllable, but Jenny Owens, I don't know. Jenny Owens. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I never know what I'm doing. But thank you all for being here, and I will see you all on Friday for Zoo News. Remember, friends, the word credits backwards is Steiderk, but the word buzz backwards is zb.
The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo.